Shut up and sit down.
Hey guys, so you want to learn how to do a conventional deadlift? That's awesome. Hopefully this video will give you enough hints, tips and instructions that you can perform one safely and one that you can progress to heavier and heavier loads. Now, first thing to clear out is I do think everybody should be deadlifting, but I don't think everybody needs to do a conventional deadlift. There are many variations that you can do. There are trap bar deadlifts, dumbbell deadlifts, you can do sumo deadlifts, you can deadlift off blocks, you can deadlift off racks. Not everybody has to deadlift off the floor unless you're a competitive powerlifter. If that's not the case, there are many ways that we can help, but today we're looking at how to get the bar off the floor into a lockout position. So the first thing that I'm going to tell anybody who comes into my gym that I coach, get rid of the sneakers. You either want to be deadlifting barefoot or in something like this. It's a nice flat sole, there's no cushioning, nice and wide so that I can root properly, and it's comfortable enough that it doesn't restrict any movement. The reason you don't want to be deadlifting in sneakers is really just because of the cushioning. There's a slight heel in it, so it can push you slightly forward, which is where you don't want your balance, but it's more really about, do you want to pick up a heavy weight while standing on a marshmallow? Now, granted, there are some shoes that are fantastic in terms of comfort and support, but ideally you'd like to be flat-footed or barefooted. If, however, you train in a gym that doesn't allow you to go barefooted, I definitely recommend looking into something like night slippers, or if you're narrow-footed, you could look at chucks. But ideally, we want somebody to have the ability to spread their toes comfortably when they start on their deadlift. Okay, so I like to teach the deadlift from the bottom up. So what we start with first is we're going to be looking at foot position. Where are your feet going to be? Now, the conventional deadlift ideally has your ankles under your hips. Now, this is going to be slightly different for everybody. I know some guys who are bigger have a slightly wider stance. I know myself, when I was pushing close to 100 kilos, I had quite a wider stance. And I've seen some people who are massive and pull with their feet almost touching, the ankle bones almost kissing. What you need to do is find the stance that suits you. An easy guide that you can do would really be doing a little vertical jump and seeing where you land. So you could do something just as simple as that. That's probably going to be really close, if not the perfect position for where your ankles and your feet need to be. Now, in terms of your feet, you can have them dead straight or slightly externally rotated, but we don't want anything flaring off to the side. Remember, we're trying to stack ourselves so that we can generate force to lift the most amount of weight. Okay, now before we get into the actual deadlift, we have to talk about what the movement is. One of the biggest mistakes I often see is people try and squat their deadlift off the floor, and that's where they end up in problems of losing back position or grinding the bar up against their knees and basically making them horrible. The deadlift is a hip hinge. So what is a hip hinge? A hip hinge, the easiest way for me, and the way I always define it to clients and students, is we're looking at maximal hip flexion, minimal knee flexion. So a hip hinge will have softer knees and you will have slight movement in knees, but obviously we're focusing on what the hips are doing. So we want to make sure that from this standing position, we want to slide the hips all the way back. As you can see, my knees are not locked, they're nice and soft. I'm trying to keep my shins vertical, but I'm really allowing my hips to go all the way back. That's the movement that we want to get into. There's obviously some tweaks to it to allow us to really get down to the bar so we can pull it up. But that is what the hip hinge is. Now, one of the things that we have to learn in the hip hinge is what do we do with our upper body. It's very easy and it's very natural for a lot of people to be able to be rooted, slide the hips back, but it's what they do with the upper body that becomes a problem. Now, a lot of people will look at trying to extend their necks, and they'll look and they'll try hyperextend because they think that if they look up, it'll help them lift the weights up. Some people don't know what to do with the upper back, so they'll hinge, 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 hinge. But as you can see, they just end up in this rounded position. What we really need to think about doing is working with our trunk. So we're looking at trying to make sure that our core is stacked. Now, a stacked core is going to be the strongest core. It's going to be the one that keeps your spine in neutral. So that's what we want in the deadlift. We're not looking for flex spines or overarched or overextended spines, we're looking for neutral. And we control neutral through how we control our core. Now, if you can imagine, there is a line parallel to your hips and then just under the ribs. We want to think about trying to keep those lines moving in unison. We don't want to let them expand. So if I use my fingers as a guide here, there I am neutral. If I'm going to overextend, you can see I lose tension here. And at the same time, I don't want to think about crunching in, because now I create too much tension anterior and posterior loses all stiffness and tension. So with the hinge, we want to think about, okay, from here, it's a really great way to learn this is if you just put your fingers on the crest of your hips and put your thumbs onto your ribs, and from here, we're going to slide back, trying to keep that distance the same. That's the movement that we want to get, and that's the movement we have to perfect before we can even get down to the bar. So now I'm assuming, however, that if you can't do that, you're going to pause the video now and you're going to go learn how to do that. If you've got it down, we can now start working on to how to get the bar off the floor. Okay, so I'm taking my socks off because I'll show you guys in terms of the idea of rooting and why you want to wire the feet, and I'll get some close-ups of that and I'll put that in with the video. Okay, in terms of rooting, we want to make sure that we're trying to put pressure under there, under the ball of the big toe, under the pinky, and on the heel. We also want to make sure that we are actively trying to squeeze the floor to bring the arch up. So as you can see, relaxed, actively squeezing, the arch lifts. Trying to grab the floor with your feet. That gives you the most stable starting position of your feet. As I said, I like to build from the bottom up. So we've got our stance, we've done a little test jump, and we have an idea in terms of where we want to work with. That stance width is not set in stone. That can change as your leverages change. Perhaps you pick up a bit of muscle, perhaps you use a bit of weight. Things will affect that, and don't think that the way you start today is the same way you're going to be deadlifting in 3 to 6, 12 months time. The second important thing is rooting in the foot. So it's all very good to have your stance width there, but if you've got relaxed feet, there's no ability to transfer power up through the ankles, shins, knees, hip bones connected to the shoulder bone, and the shoulder bones connected to the but the idea of we have to make sure that we're rooted properly. So with rooting, we want to make sure that we are actively trying to grab the floor. So I'll get you a nice close-up, and you can see here my foot is relaxed. When I root, I'm trying to put pressure into the ball of my big toe, ball of my pinky toe, and my heel, and I'm actively going to try and grab the floor. That in itself helps pick up the arch and turns on the glutes, and specifically glute medius for a little bit of external rotation. And that's where stability is going to come in. Okay, so we've got our feet sorted, and hopefully that's enough information for you to pick up. As I said, I'll throw in a couple of close-ups of my wonderful feet and hopefully give you guys a better idea in terms of what we're trying to get. Okay, so in terms of setting up to the bar now again, I'll get some nice shots of this, but we want to be close enough to the bar that we can keep it close to our center of mass. We don't want to get too close, so often what happens is people set up with their shins right on the bar, and they think, well, there we go, the bar's on my shin already, I don't have to do anything. But the problem now is in terms of getting down to the bar. When they get down to the bar, as you can see here already there, by trying to get down, I push the bar away from me already. Even if I don't push the bar away from me, in this position, for me to now create the tension I want, everything is now going to sit in my lower back. My glutes probably are going to handle, and my hamstrings, but I'm ignoring my quads, I'm ignoring a large part of my muscles. Second problem is what will happen is somebody will set up with the bar too far away because they can't see the bar. They feel that maybe they've got a power belly, maybe they just don't feel comfortable close to the bar, and they'll set up too far away. The bar will be sort of over their toe line. The problem with that is before the bar will even leave the ground, you still have to get it to center mass. for me to, and this is a lightweight at 40 kilos, for me to deadlift the bar here, it's a lot of tension, uncomfortable tension on my hamstrings. So we want to look at setting up the bar roughly midfoot. So if you're wearing shoes with laces, that's probably going to be right over the knot of the shoes or the knot of the laces. Or if you're barefoot, you're probably going to see it just over the crest of the arch on your foot. Okay, so that is going to be a general guideline in terms of where you set up. So I'm going to take you through the process in terms of me teaching a client exactly how I want them to get into the positions, the cues that I'm looking for that'll hopefully help them get the most tension in the correct positions, and then from there what we're looking for in terms of the first pull through to lockout and how to reverse movement. Okay, so what I'll have a client do is we'll establish the stance width, we'll get them set up close to the bar, right over midfoot. Okay, from here, the big mistake I see is often is people break at the knees and they'll try to get down to the bar there. That kind of puts them into a bit of a squatting position, and they're still, you can see here when I go down, it's difficult for me to get my hands onto the bar. We're hinging, that's what we're looking for. So the first thing I want to say to them is slide the hips back all the way as far as their mobility will allow. Now obviously some clients don't have the mobility for that. If they cannot get to a point where they're mobile enough to deadlift the bar off the floor, you have to move to either a trap bar or deadlifting off blocks or perhaps just some dumbbells. But assuming the client has got good mobility, or you yourself have got good mobility. So you're going to hinge as far back as you can, making sure that my core is stacked, my neck is neutral. I'm not trying to look up, I'm not looking down on my toes. I'm looking probably about 1.5 meters in front of me. I'm now hinged back. I'm trying to make sure that my weight is even on my feet, so I'm not rocking back so my toes are lifting, and I'm not pushing forward so if my heels are coming off. I've spread the weight on my feet, so I've hinged back as far as I can, and I still can't grab the bar. Okay, this is now why we've set up with a little bit of space between you and the bar. What we allow ourselves now to do is for our knees to come slightly forward, which is going to allow us to engage our quads when we start the pull, and it's also going to allow us to get down to the bar. Okay, this is ideally my starting position. So from here I can grab the bar, I've got a neutral spine, tension in the hamstrings, on the glutes, and I'm ready to go. What do you do with your hands? Okay, so we are trying to make our arms as long as possible. Obviously the longer our arms are, the less distance we have to move the bar off the floor. How do we do that? Well, we've got to figure out our grip width and what type of grip we're using. Okay, so now we've got to figure out what we're going to do with our arms. We want to get our arms long. Obviously, the longer our arms are, the shorter the range of motion we have to pull the bar off the floor. I'm not trying to shrug my deadlift because again, you can see here it probably adds 5 to 6 centimeters of range. 5 to 6 centimeter range when you're doing 40 kilos is not bad. When you're doing 200 kilos, it makes a big difference. Okay. Grip width will also affect. If my hands are wide here, already they make it higher. In that arc, the wider your hands are, the higher your arms are going to go. So ideally, we want to get our hands as close to just outside of knee width as possible. So again, I'll try and get some good shots from the front so you can see what I'm talking about. But from here, I'm going to hinge down, and I want to make sure that when I'm gripping, my knees are pushing into my forearms. I'm not going any wider than that, because I'm going to struggle to create tension in my upper back. I want them just outside of knee width, so it is the longest arm position possible. In terms of grip width, we want the grip just outside the knees. That's no. Just outside the knees. Okay. In terms of grip, this is going to be something that is 100% what you want to do. So obviously in a lighter weight, I try and make people do a double overhand grip. So double overhand grip, thumb wraps around top of the fingers, and that's the easiest way to get used to it. The other options are you can do a mixed grip, where one hand is supinated, the other one is pronated. What this does is it stops the bar rolling in your hands when it gets heavy. Or if you want to, you can do a hook grip. So a hook grip is where you would squash the thumb under the fingers. So you create tension on the bar, and I'll get a nice video of this. where you're pulling the thumb against the bar with the fingers on top. Now the hook grip is a painful grip, but it's an extremely effective grip. It stops the bar rolling. It doesn't require any stress being placed on your externally rotated arm. There's minimal risk of bicep tears. It's actually the grip that I prefer using for competition and for heavy training, unless I'm doing high repetitions, then I'll use straps. Again, you can use straps as well if you want to. I don't like doing them in the beginning phase though, because as you're learning the movement, obviously grip is a limiting factor. If you start throwing on straps too early, you'll probably start moving weight that you're not ready for. Okay, so we've got our stance width, routing, we've established what we're doing in terms of the hinge, we've established trying to make sure that our trunk stays stacked so that we are nice and able to brace properly. We've got our grip width, and we're looking at where we go from there. Okay, the next thing we have to look now is trying to create tension. So now we create tension through two mechanisms. One is obviously the brace that we're going to talk through quickly now, and then specifically in the upper back it's going to be about externally rotating the shoulders to try and activate the lats as much as possible. So with bracing, the term's been thrown around worldwide. I mean, everybody's saying, no, you must brace, you must brace, you must brace. Often what happens when people brace is they just take this massive belly of air and then they'll go and do a lift. So with bracing, you have to breathe into your belly, but it's not just the belly. What we're trying to do is we're trying to breathe into our belly and we're trying to expand ourselves around. So you almost think that if I can push my fingers in here, when I brace, you can hopefully see that I'm pushing it out. Okay. That is the tension that we're trying to create on our trunk. We have to have that tension in our trunk because any force that we generate off the floor will be lost before it gets to the barbell if we don't have that proper brace going on. The second area that I focus on creating tension is in the back of the shoulders and the upper back. One of the most common cues given is to look at retraction and depression of the shoulder blades. I don't like that order. I much prefer to depress and then retract. The reason being is when you start retracting early, a lot of people will naturally get into a shrugging position and then they'll lose that tension by going down. What we're looking to do is try to activate the lats by squeezing the arms in tight. One of the cues I do use, and I stole it from another coach, Tony Gentleball, is imagine trying to squeeze oranges in your armpits. You're trying to create tension there. We want tension in the lats because that's going to help keep the bar close to us. Remember in the beginning I spoke about, well hold on, if the bar is too far away, you're not going to have the leverage to pick it up. Well, how do you keep the bar close to you? That's the function of your lats. Your lats are there to make sure that when you pull the bar all the way from the floor, that it stays close to your body, that you're almost dragging it up your body. The second aspect is when we're in that position, we've got the long arms, we've created tension in the lats, we now want to really lock them in by doing a little bit of external rotation. That's going to help create tension across the mid-back and hopefully prevent your deadlift from being nice and straight into something like that. Obviously, we want to try and avoid any movement of the spine during the exercise. There are cases where advanced lifters can lift with rounded thoracic spines, but these are people who've been doing it for 20, 30 plus years and they're very strong in those positions and they've trained for that. For you wanting to learn how to deadlift, we really want to focus on trying to keep a neutral spine all the way through. So a neutral spine is going to be one way if you look at sideways, and I'll try to get one for this camera as well. If you're looking sideways, you're not slouching and you're not overarching. Remember, the slouching and the arching loses tension in the core. We want to keep neutral as neutral is. Okay, so we've done our feet, done our hinge, we've gotten to the bar, we've got our grip, we've now created tension. That tension will actually hopefully at a lighter weight start lifting the bar off the floor anyway. But now the next step is how do we actually get the bar off the floor? So the deadlift is a pulling exercise. It's known as the pull. I pulled 200 kilos, I pulled 150 kilos, I pulled. But one of the biggest things that are missed on it is the pressing. So it is a combination between a press and a pull. The pressing comes in terms of the quads, which I mentioned earlier. We're going to use the quads. and we're going to try and press the wall away from us. We almost think about trying to generate force in two different directions. If I'm just trying to pull the bar off the floor, I'm doing nothing but pulling. But if I'm trying to press the wall away, I create additional force to lift that bar. It's physics, Newton's laws, where for every reaction there's an equal and opposite reaction. If I'm pressing into the floor, obviously I can't move the wall, not that strong. But if I'm generating that force down, the earth generates force back up at me, which helps the pull. Okay. So I break the deadlift down into 4 different movements. It's probably a bit overkill, but I look at a first pull, a lockout, a hinge, and then returning the bar to the floor. Okay. So the first pull is where the bar is going to come from the floor to your knees. That is the one where the quads are going to be the most active in the movement. Obviously we have got tension created through posterior chain, hamstrings are firing, glutes are firing, everything in the back is firing. But without the quads you're going to struggle to get that bar off the floor while keeping your mat position. The second pull is then the lockout. So that is when, once the bar starts coming past the knees, how do you finish the exercise? So the lockout is a massive hip drive forward. It is not an overextension as you see a lot of people do. They'll deadlift the bar all the way up and then they'll end up in this sort of rainbow unicorn position and they go, hey, look how strong I am. They obviously don't like their backs and it is a high risk finishing position. It's misunderstood because one of the rules in powerlifting is that your shoulders must be behind the bar. So they will overemphasize this position to ensure that they get the rep, but in terms of long-term health, it's something that I'd highly advise against. What we want to focus on doing is once the bar comes past the knees, we're going to drive the hips forward into, again, neutral spine position. We're going to be stacked at the core, shoulders are going to be deep pressed, slight retraction, quads are going to be locked, glutes are going to be locked, and we're going to have a lot of tension. The third movement is then going to be the hip hinge. So reversing the bar down, we're going to reverse it down the thighs until we get to the knees. And again now, the fourth movement is going to be just a slight shift of the knees forward to get the bar down to the floor. That should hopefully then actually return you into your starting position. So if you're going to do multiple reps of this exercise, where you finish should be where you started. Okay. Obviously in terms of programming design, for strength athletes you'll generally do lower repetitions because you want to reinforce the efficiency of the first pull. For people doing this just because they want to be stronger, higher repetitions are fantastic, just as long as we're starting in the same position every time. And we can start in the same position as we can finish in the same position. Okay. So now that I've spoken through everything, I'm going to go through a couple of demonstrations. I'll talk through the movements as we do it. I'll try and get the cues that I'm looking for, and you can hopefully then pause this, play it back, and use it for your own benefit. I will also then stick in little inserts where I need to, just little things that I think of. Okay, so how we start the deadlift, take you through step by step in the first ring. So I'm going to step up to the bar, looking at lining it up midfoot. Okay, this is my comfortable position. As I said before, I've had a slightly wider stance when I was larger. For now, this is where I am. You can have a slight flare in the feet, maybe a little bit depending on your hip mobility, but that's really again an individual preference. We just don't want to end up in a position where our feet are flared out so much that we are actually unable to engage the glutes. Because I've externally rotated so much, I've got nothing now that I can create tension on. Okay, so we are set up. Bar over midfoot, thinking about having my core stacked. I'm nice and neutral, I'm not looking up, I'm not looking down, keeping my eyes looking forward. Okay, from there, I want to hinge as far as I can go, trying to keep my core stacked again, making sure that my back is nice and neutral. My arms are long, ready for the bar. I can't quite grab it, so now I'm going to let my knees travel forward, and I can grip the bar. I've got the bar, my hands are just outside of my knees, I can feel tension in my hamstrings, so I'm going to now squeeze the oranges in my armpits. As you can see, create tension. I can almost kind of lift the bar off the floor already, and from here, First pull, I'm going to drive into the floor. Second pull, drive the hips through. I'm not overextending, I'm not overarching. I'm trying to make sure that I'm locked and tight. Third portion, I'm going to hinge back, making sure that again the spine's neutral. Once I'm past the knees, I can now let the knees come forward, and I'm hopefully in the same position as I started. Things that you want to be aware of when deadlifting, and especially when weights get heavy. Often people will try and psych themselves up. They'll get energetic, they'll walk in, and I'm sure everybody's seen videos of guys going, ah! And they're just leaking energy everywhere. The worst thing we want to see that though is trying to jerk the bar off the floor. So as soon as we try and jerk the bar, we're going to lose tension somewhere. And when I mean jerking, it's like this. Okay. At 40 kilos, it's not an issue. At 100 kilos, it starts creating problems. When I start hitting 80%, 90% of the weight I should be with, like my max, I'm going to end up losing tension somewhere. Okay. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we're pulling the bar off the ground using that tension. So we want to make sure that in the starting position, we can feel tension in the hamstrings, tension in the glutes. Back is nice and tight because we're squeezing those oranges, and then we create tension in the quads by driving the floor away. What will happen is on a heavier weight, you should hopefully just hear a little click as the bar catches the weight, and then from there nice and smooth off the floor. So again, as you can see from here, I'm trying to create tension and the bar's already moving off the floor. From here, press the wall away, drive the hips through, hinge back, down the floor. Okay, I just want you to remember that the way I'm deadlifting is not the way that you're going to deadlift. If you're a PT, it's not the way your client's going to deadlift. Everybody's going to have slight variances and slight differences. What I'm trying to coach though is just the absolute basic beginners so that somebody can learn this movement without hurting themselves. Thank you very much for joining me today. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can reach me through my social media channels. And yeah, I hope you have a fantastic day further. Thanks.